Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Hi, it's me, Egbert, E-G-G-B-U-R-T, the owner of this radio station. I invite everyone to listen, no matter if you're young, old, black, white, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, heck, I even want real estate agents listening to my station. Yes, even Rick and Tracy. You're all welcome. Now, it's back to my Goodwill ambassadors, Brad and John.
And here we are on a Friday, but not just any Friday, John. Do you know what is special about this Friday?
I don't know.
It's a Jason Rosenbaum Friday.
Oh, is it really? Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know what makes it a J-Ro Friday.
Because he's on from noon to 1 today.
Oh, you're right. Hey, boy. Is that like, you know what I always say, Brad? Is that the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry pile for St. Louis Public Radio or what?
I heard the end of, and quite honestly, I was listening to National Public Radio yesterday, KWMU, a.k.a. St. Louis Public Radio, whatever they call themselves, yesterday. And they had an interesting segment on the death of Bob Heil. You familiar with who Bob Heil is?
Yeah, I linked to a story about him. No, I didn't link to a story about him, but the Post-Dispatch ran a big feature on him this week.
Right. Bob Heil is one of these guys who right here in our midst was like a rock star of rock stars as far as what he did and how he created the modern concert sound reinforcement type environment. There's all sorts of crazy stories about Bob Heil. I've met him a couple times. He used to have a retail shop over in Marissa, Illinois called I think it was called Ye Old Music Shop or something like that. And then he used to be on KMOX all the time. He was a favorite guest of Jim White back in the day when Jim White was still. And Bob was like the technical expert. And I can still remember listening to a show where Bob Heil was like almost gleeful about DirecTV. When they were launching the satellites, which ultimately gave us satellite television, which the sad thing is, in our lifetime, DirecTV has come and is sort of gone. There are still people with the small little satellite dishes. It was revolutionary at its time because of the fact that if you go back in the history of satellite delivered anything, programming, stuff like that, originally you have to have these big monster satellite dishes. Matter of fact, they're typically measured in meters. And in a lot of different applications, if you don't have at least like a 4 or 5 meter dish. Once again, we're talking meters. A meter is what, 30, 39 something inches?
I don't know. Stop being British and Canadian, Brad, but I get what you're saying.
A meter is a little bit more than a yard. So let's say if it was a 5 meter dish, it's a 15-foot dish. We're talking
huge. So, I remember those. Well, anybody that was around in the 80s and 90s probably remembers.
Right, C-band stuff. So Bob Heil. Anyway, they had this thing on there, and the guy who is now here's the irony of the situation. They had the guy on there who was the managing partner of the what's the little theater? Man, my mind's gone. I'm getting old, John. I'm getting.
Oh, Bob Kramer's Marionettes.
No,
I know exactly what you mean.
The place around the corner from the Fox, the Sheldon. Okay.
Oh, the Sheldon.
He's the managing partner at the Sheldon. Okay. Years ago, I went to this is a long time ago. Hopefully, and they talked about it. And this guy was the managing director of the Sheldon, and I went to I can't remember what it was. It was a comedy event or something. This is a long time ago. Probably the worst sound system I'd ever heard in a venue like that. And everybody talking, oh my God, the Sheldon is so wonderful. The sound is so wonderful. I think to myself, this sucks. This is horrible.
Isn't that the point of a venue like that, is to have perfect acoustics?
Well, the acoustics were good, but the sound system sucked. It was terrible.
The sounds. I get what you're saying. There's a difference there. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. In other words, if you had someone on stage who was like in the old days, who had an incredibly forceful voice. Remember, if you go back and look at some of those old movies, the singers would sing with a megaphone, and we're not talking like the amplified megaphone like the protesters use. We're talking like a big old cone that was small at one end, and they would yell and they would sing into that, and the sound would come out and would amplify through the megaphone. Okay. It just sounded, if it were someone who was on stage possibly if you had like instruments like brass or maybe even strings, it would have sounded good. But this was a deal where there were people on microphone, and it was extremely hard to hear what they were saying because the sound system just sucked. It was just horrible. Anyway.
Wow. Well, Bob Heil would have fixed that.
Well, but he didn't, but he should have. But his latest claim to fame, and he started this, I guess, about 20 years ago, he makes his own microphones because he got tired of, he said there were a lot of deficiencies in microphone designs. And to this day, there are a lot of people using microphones made by Heil Sound. Matter of fact, I've looked at him a couple times. He makes very similar microphones to what they call the, and if he were alive, he'd probably shoot me for this, but he makes very similar microphones to what you're seeing now used on a lot of the bloggers. Matter of fact, a lot of the bloggers use the Shure SM7 or even the RE20s, the RE320s. He makes those types of microphones, and still to this day is a very, very, very renowned name in microphones, and even in broadcast. There's a lot of radio stations using Heil microphones. So anyway, that was the deal. So as the show was ending, Elaine Chao, I think that's her name. Is that her name?
Yeah.
Okay. She says, and tomorrow it's, and let me do it exactly how she does it. And tomorrow it's Politically Speaking right here on St. Louis Public Radio. And she didn't even mention Jason's name. And
now, you know what? Just in case Jason has a sick day, as I have pointed out before, Jason over the years has worked with a set of interchangeable seat warmers. So they can just have somebody come on and probably, read some of the questions and some of the due diligence that Jason has done. Brad, if you haven't seen Jason on YouTube, or if you haven't gone out and sought out his Instagram, Jason's got this deal now that he does with his Instagram where he's learned a video technique whereby he can talk to himself. So he's done a video where he's talked to his previous self like in 2007 or 2008.
Yeah.
It's hard to put into words, but I've retweeted it and linked to it before. So essentially you can have 2024 Jason Rosenbaum talking to college-age Jason Rosenbaum, and it's just brilliant.
Okay, but hold back up a minute. You said it might not be him today then?
No, it will. No, I'm sure it will be him. I'm just saying maybe that's the reason why Mr. Chow, or whatever her name is, didn't promote him by name.
Right.
Or maybe, Brad, to pair nicely with story number 3 today, maybe you just want to help ease the pain of people of color hearing a white man's name. And we can't have white men being celebrated in St. Louis. That's story number 3 today. Is Casey around?
John, you're getting real good at this. Is Casey around? Casey, are you here?
Now on with the countdown. We're on our way to the number one. In third place.
There's Casey.
I sit here, Brad, and I won't give a big preamble, but I have here in my hands a copy of Washington University's magazine from December, and the title is In and For, and it's about what Washington University is doing for the community. And to that spirit, St. Louis Public Radio. In fact, Brad, St. Louis on the Air had an uplifting story yesterday that our listeners can get involved in, Brad.
Oh, this was the same thing I listened to? Was this this was probably earlier in the program then, right?
It might have been earlier in the program, yeah. But because I think you would have remembered this, because I think you'll participate in this, Brad. Washington University, and again, now my humble brag disclaimer, I'm a WashU grad. WashU has created a naming review board, and this allows folks in the community to help the process of changing the names of buildings that are tied to people with, quote, problematic legacies. So, for example, Brad, if there is a building, and the shining example of this is the man who founded, one of the co-founders of Washington University, is a guy named William Greenleaf Eliot. And according to a lot of research that was done a few years ago, it turns out that in the 1800s, William Greenleaf Eliot was not a social progressive.
Shame on him.
Shame on him is right, Brad. So one of the great things is that the Washington University has been able to go back and say, listen, we want nothing to do with this Eliot man. However, William Greenleaf Eliot's name still infests the Washington University campus. Point of disclosure, Brad, my dorm as a freshman was Eliot Hall.
I was going to say, isn't
my
there...
classes, I have a political science degree. My classes were in Eliot Hall.
That's what I was saying.
Campus.
Right.
And now, hopefully, what this won't do, though, Brad, I'm going to cut to the chase here. The female a cappella group at WashU is called the Greenleafs. Now, if we take the name Greenleafs away from this group, that's when you're going to see me camped out underneath Brookings Hall, what you could see from Lindell,
Right.
and I'm just going to be protesting because if you change the name of the Greenleafs, that's where I draw the line.
So do they have an agenda already as to
Yeah, well, so what this process is, it allows people, you don't have to have any tie to Washington University. So folks who are listening to this who went to Washington or you're part of a community or you have no ties whatever to Washington University, you can submit your input of why you think certain names on campus might be problematic, why we shouldn't name these things after, and think of the white men in the 1800s that were like a version of Brad Hildebrand. Like I bet there were people for whom buildings are named after on WashU's campus that did not embrace drag shows for children, that did not call people BIPOCs. What if they called people black instead of BIPOCs, Brad?
What if they used the colored word? That would be even worse, right?
Oh, even worse.
I'm telling
even
you.
worse, Brad. So what folks should do is go to my website today, and you find, of course, the St. Louis Public Radio story. And remember, Brad, the key word here is problematic.
Okay, so John, right up the get-go, let's go back to our founding fathers and our very first president. Wasn't George Washington a slave owner?
Yeah, I think so, Brad. And from what I understand, our founding fathers might have had slaves, what were known in the day as bed warmers. It was a tawdry time at that point. And the worst part is, they hadn't, if a man was dressed a little funny, they might have said that he was lightenous colonial loafers. They probably used all kinds of problematic terms.
Well, no, but seriously, doesn't the university, by its name of Washington University, isn't that problematic right from the get-go?
It is, but there's already a movement underway to rename it Corey Bush University.
Oh my God!
So we're gonna have AOC, and who's the woman with the shaved head? Not the tennis ball head, but who's the shaved? Is her name Ayanna or something?
I don't know.
She's got the real shiny head.
See, my mom and dad were both graduates of Washington University. Matter of fact, my daughter got her law degree from Washington University. If my mom and dad came back from the grave, and they would be shocked at what's happened to Washington University. I mean, and the crazy
They'd
part...
be shocked at how delightfully progressive, right, Brad?
Well, no, the crazy part of it was that back in the day, I mean, not so what year did you graduate?
2000.
I mean, my mom graduated from WashU, I think like in 46 or 47 or something like that. And my dad graduated in 50 or 51 because, it's a weird story. My dad graduated from high school, worked for 4 years in a machine shop to make enough money to go to Washington University, to pay for his first semester of school at Washington University. So he was 22 when he enrolled. He was in his first semester, and 2 weeks before finals, he got drafted, and they would not let him stay to finish out his.
You're kidding
No,
me.
he always talked about that was very disappointing. He'd worked for 4 years in a machine shop, and he got drafted, and literally 2 weeks before the end of the semester, and he pleaded with him, just give me 2 weeks. I don't have any problem with being drafted. I'll be more than happy to show up. No, you have to show up at wherever he was for basic training tomorrow, that kind of thing. So he went off to war and came back on Christmas Day, came back to St. Louis Christmas Day, 1945, and obviously didn't start school till 46. So he was, I believe he graduated when it was either 1950 or 1951. And I remember my mom and dad, even when they were still alive, talking about the fact that the majority of students back in the day were St. Louisans. They were from the St. Louis area. It was a local university, but
it was
not anymore because the local component of Washington University's got to be. Somebody told me recently there's less than 10% of local people go to WashU now.
Yeah, I believe that, and I remember my freshman year. So my freshman year was 1996. Only 10%. Oh, wait a minute. 10 to 15% of students were either from Missouri or Illinois, and that included Chicago. Now, WashU came out, I think it was about 10 years ago, and said they're essentially they're lowering the standards, of course, because they need more diversity, and they don't call it lowering the standards, but whatever. They're prioritizing giving scholarships to kids who are from the St. Louis area who wouldn't ordinarily meet a threshold. Now, of course, if you're Asian or you're white or you choose to work hard, you're eliminated from that pool. But otherwise, if you're from St. Louis and your scores aren't quite WashU level, you still have the opportunity to attend WashU.
Interesting. Okay, moving on.
Up a notch to number 2.
Missouri has made libs of TikTok twice this week, Brad. Earlier in the week, we talked about Mayor Quentin Lucas reading an inspirational book about a transgender teddy bear to kids for National Reading Day. And Missouri made libs of TikTok yesterday. Did you happen to see this, Brad?
No, what was it yesterday?
Well, this is pretty good. So the other day in the Missouri House, there's a proposal for the second year in a row. A representative named Maisie Christensen, who's from Bethany, which is in the northwest part of the state, has a bill essentially to keep drag shows away from children. So it would treat drag performances just like you would treat another, like a strip club or something to that effect, okay? And I linked yesterday to a story from the Missouri Independent. This reporter is Annalise Hanshaw. Annalise Hanshaw. Annalise Hanshaw wrote a piece and there were a couple drag performers that testified that were featured in the story. One of them is Autumn Equinox, which is a heavy-set man dressed as a woman. And then there's another one named Maxi Glamour.
Oh, you know what?
And Maxi's quotes got a lot of attention, and they were the ones that were featured on Libs at TikTok, because she talked about, and I think this is a really good point, Brad, the persecution of drag performers is based on white supremacy. Now, I don't know how, but I'm sure if you asked Maxi would be able to tell you.
I did hear that yesterday. Mark Reardon had that on his show yesterday. So, yeah, he had Maxi Glamour.
Maxi Glamour? His name was Maxi. Okay. He was a showgirl.
I've got a couple things to say, but we'll run it along. So let's go move right ahead to
the number one.
The number one.
A little bit of Republican on Republican verbal violence, Brad. A story we've talked about a whole lot on the show. Contamination, Coldwater Creek, Manhattan Project. Josh Hawley got funding through the Senate. But when asked about it, Ann Wagner said it's probably going to have a hard time getting through the House. So credit to the reporting of Daniel DeRochers from the Kansas City Star, who in the past I've given a hard time to, and he takes it like a champ. Daniel DeRochers went to Ann Wagner and was like, hey, what do you think about this? And Ann's like, pretty pricey. It's got to have a paid for. We got to be able to pay for this stuff. And then Josh Hawley, as the kids would say 10 years ago, went ham, hard as a mother, Brad. And he called out Ann Wagner for whining and dining with Zelensky. And boy, he just went off on Ann Wagner. And we get a cameo in the Post-Dispatch from our friend, or at least somebody who will talk to me, I guess. Brad, maybe not you, according to you. Nick Schroer.
He won't talk to me.
Nick Schroer weighed in, and Nick, of course, took the side of Josh Hawley in this battle. And he's pretty much like, Ann, where have you been on this issue? Now, for Ann's part, she came out, her office put together a statement and tweeted it from her account about how much she's done. She name-checked several activists like Don Chapman, which is a smart move, because if those type of folks were looking to lean toward Hawley, they could at least be like, well, Ann mentioned this by name, so we'll give her a break. But anyway, no love lost, Brad, between Hawley and Ann Wagner. And I would point out what I haven't seen in any media reports, and somebody who's listened to this should fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure this goes back to 2016, and I'm pretty sure Ann Wagner supported Kurt Schaefer for Attorney General, which is where and that's the year that Josh Hawley was elected AG. So unless I'm mistaken, Ann Wagner supported Kurt Schaefer, which might be the source of some of the heat that she's had going with Josh Hawley.
Well, I have a couple things. First off, Ann Wagner's district has a lot of the area impacted by the radioactive waste. Not necessarily the Coldwater Creek area, because that's Corey Bush up in North County. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Corey Bush also has the airport as well, too. So she has, and that's the source of most of the contamination in Coldwater Creek. But obviously, Ann Wagner is firmly in place out there in St. Charles County with Weldon Spring and the area right there. See, here's what I don't understand. The government made a blunder. Well, they didn't know they were making a blunder, because back in the 40s, they had no idea that the radioactive waste could, be something that would haunt the St. Louis area, at least that part of the area, for years and years and years. I say, no matter what the price is, fix it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we pay enough crazy, weird, let me rephrase that. We pay out a lot of crazy, weird checks to stupid stuff that the government funds. And this is something that has been proven. And once again, I say again, jump in your car. You don't believe me. Drive to the north side of the airport. Get off. If you're going 170, go get off at Airport Road. Go west at Airport. Make a right at McDonnell, about midway between the old McDonnell Douglas headquarters, right there. It sits up on the hill, and Lindbergh is the waste site that they will be digging today. I bet you any money, if I drive up there in North County today, they'll be digging the contaminated dirt out of there today. This is not something, and once again, this happened back in the late 40s, like actually in the mid 40s, because they were disposing of some of this stuff because some of the uranium, and I've done research on this, as nerdy as it sounds, some of the stuff that they were doing, and this was Mallinckrodt, was like as far back as like 42 and 43. Because the Manhattan Project.
I think, and not to interrupt, Brad, but I mean, I think Ann Wagner's point is, what's the price tag on this? We're trying to cut spending, and if I'm a St. Louis congressman, and somebody comes to me from New Mexico and is like, hey, we only need a cool few billion, I'm going to be like, heck no. Now, it's different when it's in your backyard, but the thing is, and this is the paradox, if you're a House Republican, you think, hey, we're supposed to be all about cutting spending.
Well, yeah, right. And just like the Missouri legislature, the Republicans who have been in charge for how long? How long does Republicans have?
And we've doubled the state budget.
Right, and they doubled the state budget. Yeah, those Republicans who don't want to spend any money.
That's true. And I mean, the place that we should start is entitlement. We should not start with people who've been injured by the government. That's what my philosophy would be.
Okay, we have to move on. We are running late on this Jason Rosenbaum Friday. It is.
I love it.
Do you think he'll even know what we're doing? Oh, you'll text him or something, right?
Hey, well, he listens.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?